Free, Fire and Water from 1970. An absolute classic album. But is it Paul Rodgers' best album ever? Hello, good evening and welcome to tonight's episode, and this is all about Free, Fire and Water from 1970. It was their third album and it was the one that pushed them up into the big leagues, if you like, and got them noticed all over the place. Hit single on here, of course, All Right Now, and a place on the Isle of Wight festival bill, where some people will tell you they were the best band that were on all day. So what of this album? It was their third. They hadn't been overly impressed with the production of the second one, and so decided they were going to take a bit more of a hand in it, and so decided they were going to basically try and produce it themselves. They had Andy Johns in there as the engineer. He got a bit fed up with it all in the end and decided that he'd had enough, and he left them to it. And the bloke that came in to help out was Roy Thomas Baker, who went on to produce Queen. In the end, on the album credits, it was actually down as being produced by Free and John Kelly, rather than just being produced by Free on their own. So most people will look at this album and they'll look at the track listing and they'll go, oh yeah, that's the album with All Right Now on. Yes, it is the album with All Right Now on, but it's got 6 other tracks on it which are all equally as good and vitally important in the makeup of the band that was Free. The first thing to say, of course, is the version on here is not the same as the one that you hear on the radio, because that one was edited down to make it shorter. This one's got an extra verse and some more musical passages on there, and some great ad-libbing at the end from Paul Rodgers. Clocks in a lot longer than the single version and is worth buying probably just for that alone. And I'm sure there are plenty of people out there just like me who every time they hear it think, oh, it's going to be the short version, I want to hear the long version because I want to hear all that stuff that they chopped off the single. And sometimes I think it was a crime to do that, but then what would have happened if they hadn't done it and Free hadn't had the hit single? Would things have gone the same way? Who knows? And it's pretty special, isn't it, that a song that was written so long ago and apparently so quickly, and simply because somebody told them you need to get yourself a song that's a little bit more upbeat, ends up being a hit that's still being played on the radio 50 years later. 55 years later, in fact. What about the rest of the album then? Well, as I said, 6 other tracks on here. You've got Fire and Water, the title track, which kicks it off. Absolutely stellar track, that, isn't it? I mean, if you're going to say to somebody, give me an example of how you can marry the blues and rock together and then throw a soul vocal on the top and it'll still work. Fantastic. In fact, Wilson Pickett thought it was pretty fantastic as well, and he decided he was going to cover it on his next album. So he must have looked at that and thought, there's a soul track for you. Brilliant start to the album. Then you go into one of the sort of slow, sad, melancholy songs. And the thing that's interesting here is that when Fire and Water ends and then Oh I Wept starts, you automatically feel as though you want to turn the volume up because it's so much quieter. But it's quieter on purpose because that brings the dramatic effect in. It does also mean that if you are going to buy an old copy of this album, you've got to make sure that you get a good clean one, because the quiet passages do need to be listened to quietly, really. And it's got a lot of sort of volume difference, if you like, on this, but volume difference that's been done on purpose, not accidentally. The other track which was played live a lot of the time was Mr. Big. That was in the set right the way through until the final tour, and I think a lot of the time it didn't get played on the final Heartbreaker tour, but while Andy Fraser was in the band, it was in the set right the way through. All of the other tracks on the album, in fact, all 7 of the tracks on this album were played live at some point. And I know this because I've got a live version of every single one of them in my little cabinet, which has got my free bootlegs in. So they didn't all get played that many times. I mean, Heavy Load was taken out of the set as soon as Be My Friend came along, because a lot of people will say it's a similar type song, and maybe that was a precursor, if you like, to Be My Friend, and that was an extension of that idea. The track just before that on the album, the track called Remember, actually started life as a track called Woman by the Sea, which was going to be recorded on either the first or the second album, I can't remember, but you can pick that up on that free box set Songs of Yesterday if you can find it and hear it in its original form. The last track to mention is Don't Say You Love Me. Now, the reason why I've left that one to last is because it was the last free track that I ever heard. Well, I say it's the last free track I ever heard. It was the last readily available at the time free track I heard. Obviously, since then, I've heard lots of different other tracks that were outtakes or left off albums and all that sort of stuff. But of the tracks that were on the original 6 albums, Don't Say You Love Me was the last one that I heard, because this, bizarrely, was the final free album that I bought. Now, you're probably thinking, what's standing there saying to us this is a brilliant album and it's probably Paul Rodgers' best album ever? And the reason that I'm saying it's Paul Rodgers' best album ever, I'll come to in a bit, but I'll just clear this up as to why it was the last album I bought. The reason it was the last album that I bought by free, it wasn't a deliberate thing, it was just the way things were in those days. And you've got to remember, it's sort of like 1980, I'm not 16, whatever, and I've suddenly got into all these bands. And all these bands have got massive back catalogues. 1980, remember? And all the stuff from the 70s, that's a whole decade of rock. Plus you've got the stuff from 68 onwards. So all these bands that I was getting into had all got massive back catalogues, like Free and Deep Purple and stuff. But they'd also got offshoot bands that I needed to get into as well, like Whitesnake and Rainbow and Gillan and Bad Company and all sorts of things like that. So there was a ton of albums there just from those 2 bands. Plus then you've got to throw in, well, you've got your Black Sabbath and your Uriah Heeps and your Nazareth and your Thin Lizzies and your Rushes and your AC/DCs and your Genesises and all that lot. And they all got sort of 10 years or so of back catalogue that you've got to get out of as well. So there was a ton of stuff that you needed to buy. So what you really didn't do, unless it was a new album that was coming out, you didn't go in and buy new copies of old albums. What you did was you tried to get second-hand copies. Now, obviously, I've spoken about the record and tape exchange in Notting Hill Gate and stuff, which was brilliant for that sort of stuff. And that's where I did get quite a lot of my albums. But not this one, because I don't think anybody ever sold this album. It was so good, I don't remember ever seeing it for sale, second-hand. And so, it'd be a case of, you go in and you sort of like, you'd find 3 or 4 other albums with bands that you'd buy, and then you end up not buying this one. And of course, by the time that's gone on for a few months, you look at it and you think, well, actually, there's only one track on there I haven't got anyway, because Fire and Water and Heavy Load and Mr. Big and All Right Now, and they were all on the Free Story, which I'd already got a copy of. Oh, I Wept was actually on the very first free album I ever bought. Because the very first free album I ever bought was a compilation album called Free and Easy, Rough and Ready. And I bought it, and I couldn't believe that All Right Now was supposedly their most well-known song, and it wasn't on it. I think a little while later, I'm not sure how long later, but a little while later they repressed that album, may even have been the same year, and the track Oh I Wept was replaced with All Right Now, and it had a thing on the front saying now featuring All Right Now, so obviously a lot of people had moaned that All Right Now wasn't on it. So if you see a copy of that about, you see the one that hasn't got All Right Now on, that's the original version of that album, Free and Easy, Rough and Ready, which was my actual introduction to Free. Do I suggest that this might be Paul Rodgers' best album? Well, for me, this is one of those albums that is right up the top. So sometimes I think I prefer Highway, sometimes I think I prefer this. I don't know what it is. I think because I think Highway was the first proper free album that I got. I look at Highway the same way I look at Come Taste the Band by Deep Purple. I think if I'm being brutally honest, this one is probably slightly better. There's probably a few weaker tracks on Highway, but it's got things like Ride On Pony, Be My Friend, and I just love those tracks. But this is probably just slightly better. The reason why I say it could be Paul Rodgers' best album is what everybody knows, that I think Paul Rodgers is the best rock singer in the world ever. So if I'm going to be rating this album as my second best album ever, behind a certain Deep Purple album, and I've got to be thinking it must be Paul Rodgers' best album, haven't I? Really, a lot of people will be saying to me, oh yeah, but what about some of those Bad Company albums? This has got a little bit of everything on it, I think, because he shows that he can belt out a rock tune like Fire and Water, but still keep that soul feeling which he got. Because I think that's probably what he was, really. He was a soul singer before he was anything else, I think. And he managed to adapt that into rock. That's how he ended up becoming the greatest rock singer, because he probably didn't set out to be a rock singer. He set out to be a soul singer, I think. They were the people that he was listening to, and he managed to be able to turn that into, with that and the blues, turn it into a sort of prototype for rock singing that's been followed by hundreds and hundreds of rock singers since. It's incredible when you think about the amount of people that are singers who cite Paul Rodgers as their favourite singer, or the one that they wanted to sound like. And this album sort of showcases everything that he can do because you've got the soul in there, you've got the blues in there, you've got the rock in there, you've even got the sort of poppy bits in there, and the fact that he can churn out the chorus to All Right Now like a pop song, and it's just wonderful. The other thing again that makes this so special is the other three. It's sometimes too easy with Free to focus too much on Paul Rodgers and Paul Kossoff. I haven't mentioned Paul Kossoff much yet in this today, but I'm going to now because it's the way that the four of them work together is what makes this album special, and it's what makes those first four, probably three albums, so special. And maybe just losing it a little bit by the time Free at Last came out, but those first four albums, it's like they all know what everybody else is going to do next, even though they haven't decided themselves what they're going to do next. They're all just so in sync. Simon Kirke's drumming is a perfect fit. Nobody is ever going to sit down and try and compare Simon Kirke to John Bonham or Keith Moon or Cozy Powell or even Ian Pace. It's totally different, but it's perfect for this band. Andy Fraser's bass playing, again, is totally perfect for the way that Simon Kirke played the drums, and the way that the two of them play that together is a perfect backdrop for the way Kossoff played his guitar, and the way that Kossoff played his guitar was a perfect vehicle for Paul Rodgers to do his singing, because Kossoff doesn't try and beat him anywhere. He doesn't try and outdo him, does he? He doesn't go for that singer's getting on the limelight. I'm going to go and throw in some flashy guitar that's going to put the limelight on me. What he does is he plays his... Obviously, when he's playing his solos, he's the centre of attention. But what he also does is he picks out the vocals and makes them sound better in some places, just with little notes here and then missing bits out and playing the odd sort of chord or whatever. I'm not a musician, so it's difficult for me to try and explain it, but I'm sure you probably get what I mean. Listen to it and see, isolate the guitar and the voice, if you like, and listen to the way that the guitar works with the singing. It's totally different to the way Richie Blackmore and Ian Gillan played together, or Robert Plant and Jimmy Page, or anybody else like that. Paul Rodgers didn't do the same with Mick Rouse. That was totally different. Again, that was more your normal sort of thing. But the way that Kossoff was with the singer is incredible. And to sort of reaffirm that point, if you only listen to the Backstreet Crawler albums, especially the second one, you can tell it on that as well. It's just incredible. But the four of these, they just went together. I mean, look at the back of this. You see the picture of the back. I mean, that just looks, doesn't it? The four of them looking through the window and stuff. And then you got the four of them on the front here. And it's like, we're about to take on the world, and we'll take you by the scruff of the neck and chuck you out the back window. And it really is a truly brilliant album. If you've never heard one, go and get one. Go and get one now, this minute. Go and find it on YouTube, find it on Spotty thingy, whatever. Just get a listen to it. Everybody needs to listen to this album at least once in their lifetime. It's just marvellous. It's great. I could wax lyrical about it all night, but it will just be wasting your time because you need to go and listen to it instead. Free, Fire and Water from 1970. Fantastic album. Superb from start to finish. Not a wasted note on it anywhere. What do you think? What's your favourite track on this? What do you think of All Right Now? Are you one of those people who gets fed up with songs they've heard too often? Is All Right Now a Stairway to Heaven, Smoke on the Water type track for you? Or does it still get you going when you hear it on the radio or in the pub when a cover band are doing it? Or is it one that you quite happily never listen to again? What do you think of the rest of the album? Where do you think it fits in the Free catalogue? Is it their best? Did anything else come better than it? What about Paul Rodgers? Of course, Paul Rodgers went on with Simon Kirke to form Bad Company, who just got inducted into that Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, didn't they, at the weekend? Well, you're not going to find any sign of Free in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but there are a lot of people who will tell you that Free were a better band than Bad Company. I've got one foot in both camps, but it's pretty obvious to me that without this, you'd never have had Bad Company in the first place. So, essential isn't the word for this. It's rock royalty, whatever you want to call it. It's diamonds, it's treasure, it's gold dust. This is massively important in the history of rock music, and it should be an essential part of anybody's collection if they are a lover of rock music. So, thanks for listening to me going on a little bit. Thanks to everybody who's been watching and subscribing as well. We've picked up quite a few new subscribers over the last month or so, which is great. So we're continuing that push to try and get up some decent numbers, and I'll try and churn these out a little bit more regularly if I can, and I'll catch you all again.